It's the finale for the Ref the District March Madness QB edition. Our choice, JJ McCarthy against the top contender, Jayden Daniels. Who do you got? Let's go. Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Ref the District's finale to the March Madness QB edition. I'm Nathan Perry. That's the Stoner here, a part of the Believe Network. And this is our finale. We did the fan finale. People have had a chance to vote on that. Jayden Daniels, Drake May. You're going to get a chance to vote on this. Maybe Drake May wasn't your choice. Maybe you're one of the 30% or so of the people who voted and said JJ McCarthy. You're with us on that. Well, now is your chance to speak for your guy. So we'll have another poll out for you to vote for either JJ McCarthy or Jayden Daniels, and let us know either in the comment section here or the comment section of that poll, or do it both, because anytime you like this channel or you comment, it helps other people find us and lets us know that you support Ref the District. So make sure you're doing that. Make sure you sub to the channel as well. If you're listening to us on audio, make sure you leave us a rating and review, because that also helps us out. Thank you kindly for that. And let's get into this one. Jayden Daniels is by far the higher prospect here, rated number one in our bracket, rated number one because Caleb Williams was a player that we took out because that he's going 1-1. So Jayden Daniels was slid up to that number one spot there. Drake May took number two and was upset by our number three pick here, JJ McCarthy, who has seen a lot of love this offseason as far as where he might fall in this draft. He could go as high as number two to Washington, and I don't think anybody sees him going outside the top 15. There are a lot of people who are convinced that he will go before either Jayden Daniels or Drake May, whoever gets taken at two. If it's not JJ McCarthy, JJ McCarthy could be taken either by the Patriots or by Minnesota moving up. We hear a lot about JJ McCarthy being like the prototypical Kyle Shanahan type quarterback. You got KOC over there in Minnesota, might be the team to move up for him, but Washington could steal him at number two. These are the quarterbacks we're going to be talking about today. I don't think we have great names for either of these two yet, so the fan bases. So we'll have to come up with some of those as we go along. I think it'll be more important once Washington selects. We are just a few weeks away from the draft, and this is going to be an interesting time, and we will start to shift our focus past the QBs after this is finished. So we'll need some help picking out some players for that. But right now, let's talk about these two here, Stoner. Jayden Daniels, a guy you love. You really, really love him. There's only one thing you don't love about him, and that's one of the things that scares the living daylights out of me. But talk about this player here who is older. I think these are some of the negatives. We don't agree with these, but these are some of the negatives. I'm going to get out of the way real quick. All right. He's older. He's going to be 24 by the end of this season, which means, by the time he signs his second contract, he's practically 30, which means he's practically, our age. and then he's small frame, right? He's like 200 pounds, 210 pounds for a 6'2", 6'3" guy. He's really scrawny. He's a running quarterback, so he's going to get hurt. With that small frame, especially, he can't take an NFL hit. Like, these are all things that people say to try to knock him. We don't agree with that. So why don't you touch that first, and then we'll talk about some of those positive things that we really like about Jayden Daniels.
Well, I think it's fair to say all those things. For me personally, I don't think that it's necessarily that I disagree with some of those negative viewpoints on him. I agree with some of them, but I don't think that they are big enough factors to say I'm going to pass on Jayden Daniels at number two, because they're real. The age thing, a little bit, it's overblown to me, but it can be. General managers can look at that and say, man, I'm going to miss out on possibly 2 to 3 years because he's not 21 years old like some of these other prospects are. So that can be a negative. That's not to me. I like older quarterbacks who come into the league. That just means they've gotten way more reps. Like, if I took Jayden Daniels and matched him up to Anthony Richardson, who I absolutely love also. Anthony Richardson played like all of 10 college football games, and Jayden Daniels has played like 50 college football games, whatever the number is. I want that guy who's played 50 rather than the guy who's 10. And Anthony Richardson is like 21 years old, maybe 22 now, going into his second year. So that one doesn't bother me at all. But the slight frame, that's something you got to be concerned with. And then the one that we haven't really necessarily specifically talked about, but the pressure to sack ratio is a factor.
Yeah, that's a real reason. That's why I didn't list it here, because the other reasons I think are, to me, the small frame. I understand people are worried about that. I understand people are worried about him being a running quarterback, but the stats don't pan out for running quarterbacks being more injured than non-running quarterbacks. Right. So that part doesn't, scare me. He can't take an NFL hit. The guy was in the SEC, and I get that not everybody in the SEC ends up in the NFL, but they have some big dudes that he was taking hits from. You don't want him to take those hits continually, and that's where that pressure to sack ratio is going to come into play. But I mean, he's taken the hits. He's fine. He's a football player, and yes, we're all scarred from RG3 and Nagata bending his leg in ways that it shouldn't have bent. Okay. But we have to trust that it's not going to happen to Jayden Daniels. That was an isolated incident. And even though you just brought up Aaron Richardson, who also was injured his rookie year, it's not a guarantee that Jayden Daniels will get injured. And so I don't want people putting their vote towards a concern that's something you have zero control over. Okay. There's zero control over injuries. So don't vote, or don't take Jayden Daniels out because you're like, oh, well, he can get injured, because JJ McCarthy, Drake May, Spencer Rattler, these guys all can get injured.
Yeah, but the risk factor, Nathan, there is a risk factor. I'm just saying, in terms of when you're comparing those guys, the risk factor is a little bit higher for a guy like Jayden Daniels because of his slight frame. It just is. I mean, if you took the two guys and you gave them the exact same hits, again, I'll use Anthony Richardson and Jayden Daniels. Two guys take the exact same hits. The risk of one guy getting hurt compared to the other is much higher for Jayden Daniels. It just is, because of his frame. That's not how it works, though. I understand that. But it's just, I think it's a bigger risk when you have to start nitpicking certain details. Regardless, though, we are talking about finding little minute things that are wrong with a quarterback so that we can decide if they are worth the risk to take at number 2. Because there's no doubt that you're going to find a flaw in every single prospect. We found flaws in Andrew Luck, who was considered a generational prospect. We found flaws in Peyton Manning. Manning versus Leaf was kind of the same as May versus Daniels is, although it's not the number 1 pick here, but back then it was the number 1 pick. We found flaws in Peyton Manning's game, which there really shouldn't have been. So we're going to find flaws. It's whether or not he can overcome them, learn from them, continue to develop, or if that risk factor is big enough to where you have to say, I can't do it. I can't do it with Jayden Daniels. For me, I don't see those risks as being something that you're going to say, I'm going to pass on this guy. I'm not going to draft a quarterback, or I'm not going to draft this quarterback. I'm drafting Jayden Daniels because I like all those things, and I think it's worth those risks.
Those risks I wouldn't be shy about. Like, just like those ones, I'm like, okay, these are acceptable risks factors based on the fact that the explosive play you're getting. And we can talk for days about just how amazing of a player Jayden Daniels is. He has a lot of wow plays on tape. He does a lot of the little things right. So those, there's a reason why he was a Heisman winner. There's a reason why he's looked at as a top 5 pick in this NFL draft, and not just top 5 pick based off of being QB, but one of the better prospects. This one, if you're looking at best player available type, Jayden Daniels is up there on a lot of people's boards. The concerns for me, we talk about pressure to sack ratio, His senior year was his lowest. He at 20.2, which put him right about where Russell Wilson was last year. And Russell Wilson has historically had a sack issue in his NFL career. Even as great as we know Russell Wilson has been in his career, that has been a problem. So you can be successful with taking lots of sacks, but it's a rarity. It's not a given. And if you're worried about his size and his frame and being injured and stuff like that, taking sacks at the rate that he does is a big concern for him. And I mean, his senior year was his lowest at 20.2, and there's not been an NFL QB that's been successful for years in the NFL that has not had at least one season below 20%. Okay. So Jayden Daniels would have to be the exception to that rule right now for that to happen. His college career is at 24% pressure to sack ratio. That means when he is under pressure, 24% of the time, he's going to be taking a sack. And 80% of drives that have a sack in them end in 0 points.
I can't do that sort of math, but if you start adding
and it goes for an abysmal offense is what it does. And it's going to, I think that's going to be very frustrating.
Yeah.
For Jayden Daniels, because I do think he has offensive rookie of the year potential with how electric of a runner he is, about how polished of a passer he is. I do have one issue with his passing, and I think this adds to his pressure to sack ratio. One of the highlights, if you look at just the box score type stats of Jayden Daniels, is the low interception numbers. Was it 50 touchdowns, 4 interceptions? There's you just fantastic, right? That pops out at you, and that's something you want to see from your QB, is taking care of the ball. And then you start watching the games and you're looking at it and you realize Jayden Daniels waits for his players to get open. He has, I think, a reluctance. He doesn't want to make that bad throw. And I think it might be something he's learned through his 5 years in the college ranks there was, don't force it. So he does wait for it to get open. He does throw some, and he does anticipate. Okay. I'm not saying he doesn't. There are times where you can see that he anticipates, but far too often when I was watching and listening to some people talk about him, that was the one thing that kept popping up, was that he's waiting. That's why he had a low interception rate, was because he was just waiting for his guys to be open. And he's got 2 top tier NFL talented wide receivers, first round wide receivers that he can rely on getting open. And then if they're not open, he just used his legs. He scrambled a lot. And I think I don't mind yards on the ground or yards in the air. As long as you get a first down, it's a first down. But successful QBs tend to be the ones who move the pocket and find that open pass play. They can get the yards on the ground. We've seen Lamar Jackson, even Justin Fields, even though he doesn't have a lot of success in the NFL, right? They get first downs with their legs. Both of those QBs, though, are much more successful when they move out of the pocket, try to find the big play, and then if that breaks down, go ahead and take the yards. Yeah. And Jayden Daniels far too often will just put that ball down and go. And I think part of that is because his speed is not, it's not a quickness, it's a straight line speed. Like once he gets going, if you give him 5 yards, he's gone. Like he's got that speed. But if you can get to him within that 5 to 10 yard range, then he's not nearly as shifty. And I have seen some great plays, like his stop, and go, his stepping out of bounds type stuff. Great, but he doesn't necessarily really have that shiftiness to him, but he's got some straight line speed. I'm talking far too negative about a guy who is projected to go number 2. You like him at number 2. I call you Danny Boy all the time. And Bet Online has him as the odds-on favorite right now, or at least tied with Drake May. And you can check that out right there at Bet Online, your number 1 source for all of your summer sports, whether it's baseball, golf, NBA basketball, NHL, all of it's right there. Latest stats, news, scores, odds, lines, team matchups, player props, right there on the website or on your mobile device. Get into the action with Bet Online, where the game starts. I'm talking far too bad about Jayden Daniels, who I like. I like all of these QBs. So let's hear your take then on JJ McCarthy,
Okay.
who you picked over Drake May and have threatened to end the channel, our friendship, if I were to take JJ McCarthy over Jayden Daniels. And you already ended the channel on our Drake May video. But let's hear about JJ McCarthy and why you're not really high on him here in this matchup.
Well, I mean, I have him as QB3 in this draft, right? Caleb 1, Jayden 2, and then JJ McCarthy 3 ahead of Drake May. So that might tell you how much I do like him. Here's the thing, Nathan. I can't really find a whole lot of negatives on JJ McCarthy. I can't find them. I've been looking. I've been watching the tape. I've been listening to others. I've been reading. I can't find a whole lot of negatives. The biggest negative I hear about, he does kind of have a little bit of a slighter frame as well. He's not a bigger guy. He's got all the same traits that Jayden Daniels has. The only problem is he just doesn't have the numbers to back it up, and that he wasn't used as much at Michigan than these other quarterbacks were used at their school. I don't find that as a negative. It's not because he couldn't do it, because the numbers were there, the throws were there. It's just that they didn't need to use him because they had such a quality team. They had a great offensive line. They had a great rushing attack. They had a great defense. And so they didn't rely on him. How's that a negative? Why do you want to throw your quarterback into riskier situations just because you know he has the potential to beat those risky situations? I can't find him, Nathan. I can't find the negatives on him other than he's not Jayden Daniels. That's all I got is for a negative on JJ McCarthy.
I mean that's really fair, because that's the same thing I found when I was looking, because I was not a JJ McCarthy guy when this off season started. When we're like, okay, let's start focusing on the draft and see who our guys were. I was very down on JJ McCarthy because my image of him was what I think most people start with and probably still have at this point, was he was not the guy at Michigan, right? He was just a QB who was just, there. They didn't need him. You got the Penn State game where he only threw like 10 passes. And that's what people remember. Like, if he was the guy and you want your QB to be the guy, then that offense would have ran through him. And I totally bought into it. I understood. I was like, yep, this is JJ McCarthy, second round, we'll be fine. But he's got to sit. He's not a guy who I would want. And then I start watching and listening and going around and kind of actually breaking down some things and listening to very smart people break down things. And the more and more I found myself liking JJ McCarthy. He does a lot of the little things right. He doesn't get bored with completions. When they needed him, he was there. If it was a 3rd and 7, the guy is getting it. Okay. Absolutely just lights out on 3rd down. I think he actually had some of the best 3rd down numbers in the college year last year. So he has that ability to do it. He didn't have to take over a game because, like you said, Michigan with a great defense, Michigan with Blake Corum and good running backs. He doesn't have a lot of offensive talent there. You got Roman Wilson, right? Who might go in the 2nd round. But outside of that, Blake Corum's a running back and probably going to go in day 3. So like, he didn't have the offensive talent, and their game was play defensive ball, run the ball, and just beat the other team. And he was really good at that. He's really good at throwing over the middle. Jayden Daniels can throw over the middle, but JJ McCarthy threw over the middle. JJ McCarthy threw with anticipation. JJ McCarthy just moved the ball down the field. And I really, really, really like that. I really like what I saw with him, which is why I took him over Drake May. I think there's consistency there. There's the unknown. Most people assume, because we've only have 2 years compared to 5 years with Jayden Daniels, and we didn't see eye-popping numbers from JJ McCarthy. So most people assume that his ceiling is lower. We've talked about this, right? Like Drake May could be a 10, could be a 1. Jayden Daniels could be a 10, could be a 1. JJ McCarthy could be an 8, right?
Yeah.
Maybe like that's what most people think of him when it comes to this. And that is a legitimate concern. Like if his ceiling is not a 10, why are you taking him at 2?
Yeah, and maybe it can be, but we have proof. We have visual proof that Jayden Daniels can be a 10. We don't have a visual proof that JJ McCarthy can be a 10. And that's probably the difference. I look at them as very even when you put the two next to each other, very even. But I've seen Jayden Daniels do things that most quarterbacks can't do. I've seen him do things that get me excited about him putting on a Commander's uniform and being our quarterback for the next 6 to 8 years. I haven't seen JJ McCarthy do it. And that's not a negative against McCarthy, but if I haven't seen it, and if I'm lining two guys up next to each other, and I'm saying, which one would I rather have? Well, this guy's proved he can do special things with his legs. He can do special things with his arm. McCarthy can do things.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he can do special things. I haven't seen it. So that's why I have to take this in this bracket, in this matchup. If I'm selecting at number 2 for Washington, and these two quarterbacks are going to be available, and they will be, I'm taking Jayden Daniels 100 times out of 100.
Yeah, love the position Washington is in here right now, because at 2, they've got their guy. I don't think there's going to be mind games. If they like JJ McCarthy, they're not trading back and risking him being taken. And, for that to happen, if they're trading back, they got to go to 4 or 5. And then that's if they like any of the 3 QBs, right? And assume that one of them is going to be here. But they're not going to do that. They're going to stay at 2. They're going to take their guy. I don't think it's my guy. My guy is JJ McCarthy. I love the consistency. I love what he brings. I understand that he might not have as high a ceiling. I understand he doesn't have a one-of-one talent, which is what Jayden Daniels brings this draft with his running ability. But JJ McCarthy is just a guy who is going to be successful in this league, because he just does those little things. He might not be fantastic. He could just be Andy Dalton. He might be Alex Smith. Washington would be lucky to have either of those QBs, back in their day, right? So, Jayden Daniels could be, Randall Cunningham, comp that people like, and absolutely would love that. One of these QBs is going to be successful, and my personal take on it is I think JJ McCarthy is going to be successful. We mentioned the pressure to sack ratio, and just to give people an idea of how important that is. Jayden Daniels' senior year, his best year, 20.2%, 16.8% for JJ McCarthy. That doesn't sound like a big difference, right? It's, barely, it's almost 4%, like 3 something, right? That's a sack a game extra that Jayden Daniels will be taking over the likes of JJ McCarthy. And when you're talking about how sack drives that have a sack in them don't score points, those numbers start to become very much a concern. And that really is the reason why I can't pick Jayden Daniels. Is it's probably recency bias, right? We have a huge sack total from last year with Sam Howell. We're introduced to the stat, and I'm just super focused on it. Statistically speaking, though, that it's just one of the stats that doesn't improve. Jayden Daniels is who he is with this, and it's going to be a concern. Washington takes him. I'm fully on board with it. I think that he's an exciting player, and hopefully we get closer to this 20.2. We just said Russell Wilson was successful. He had a decent year last year at about that same rate. But it's a big concern for me, which is why I would take JJ McCarthy, even if he's a little bit more milk toast.
Well, if Washington takes JJ McCarthy and he's Andy Dalton / Alex Smith, you're going to have a fair shot at having good runs and getting shots at winning the championship. If they take Jayden Daniels and he's a Randall Cunningham, you're going to have a better shot at making championships. But either or, you're going to so much improve this franchise. I'm kind of with you. I don't think you can go wrong with either of these two guys. So whatever they end up doing, one might be a little bit better than the other, but both of them are going to elevate this franchise for hopefully the next 6 to 8 years.
Well, we certainly hope so. This is going to conclude it here. I'm on JJ McCarthy. Stoner is on Jayden Daniels once again here for our March Madness QB edition. Head over to our polls, vote in there. Make sure you comment here as well. Let us know what you think. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for the JJ McCarthy take here. I've been very open that I'm a JJ guy. I just been watching so much of it and I just became a fan. So hopefully you are on board with me. I know you're picking Jayden Daniels though, because that's just how people have lined up. We'll see how it goes though. Make sure that you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I'm Nathan Perry. That's the Stoner here on the Believe Network. We are Ref the District, part of Believe Network, brought to you by Bet Online. And until next time.
Well, as promised, if you took McCarthy over Daniels, Nathan, we are no longer friends.
Be a fan.